you're public, so this is your fault. And Jill never chose that. That wasn't ever chosen. I do hold, to some extent, I think, I don't know, we might feel differently about this, Jill and I, but I do feel that it was partly her parents' fault, knowing what was going on and continuing on with the show the way that they did.
Yeah. But the people that we hold responsible, as we've outlined in the book, for the release of
bad actors in the family, bad actors in the media, bad actors in city government, county government.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Tuesday, September 26th, 2023. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I do apologize for not being on camera today. Again, just still not feeling well, still dealing with sick kid. It's life. But Jill and Derick, they just did an interview with Entertainment Tonight, and Derick Dillard did something that no one in this family has literally ever done, and that is publicly hold Michelle and Jim Bob Duggar responsible for making the decision to put their family on television while there was all of these other situations going on in their home related to their son Joshua and their daughters, and instead went forward making their children public figures and thus creating what has now become some of the biggest pain for the girls in their lives. And it all comes down to the 2015 release of a police report into Josh Duggar. Now, this is discussed in Jill's book, though in the book, you actually learn some of the very disturbing things that Jim Bob Duggar told his daughters about the situation, and how, in many ways, he made his daughters believe that people that were reporting the issues to authorities and those that were requesting records and releasing records were the ones that were hurting them more than Josh. Incidentally, Jim Bob is clearly and apparently, allegedly, now telling people that Jill is harming the family more than Josh. Go figure. So this new interview comes out from Entertainment Tonight and was released on their YouTube channel, and they talk about the book. In the book, Jill writes about having to go down to the station and talk to people after they had been reported to DHS by someone after a letter that was written by Kaylee Holt was found by someone in their church. And Jim Bob obviously did not react the way that a normal father would. And instead of handling it like a rational human being, he instead blamed the woman at the church for reporting him. So this is what she wrote. I had heard that the person who had found the letter and phoned the hotline had also talked to a few other people in our church. While the details remained private, the story of my brother having problems spread throughout our small home church. Some families treated us kindly and with compassion, but I believed others were jealous of our success with the reality television show and treated us with suspicion. This is what her dad said. They threw us to the wolves. They did not stick up for us at all. They're the ones who made this happen. They're the ones who allowed DHS to investigate our family, even though we all had already taken care of it. She wrote, the fallout was immense. We didn't know who we could trust, who was for us or who was against us. We pulled back from the church and no longer allowing them to host services at the big house. It created a deep divide among our church, and in time, inevitably, I guess the church split. Like Pops, I was hurt and angry. Jim Bob literally called people that reported what Josh did to his sisters to police jealous, and brainwashed his daughters into believing that the people that reported them to police were jealous of their success. And she writes this in her book as though she believes that the people that reported Josh to police were jealous. So I'm not really sure. She's clearly still got some stuff she needs to unpack with this, right? And Jim Bob's reaction is, they threw us to the wolves. They're just jealous. How could they do this? We handled this privately. It didn't work, Jim Bob. It didn't work. Jim Bob in this book is painted not very well, but there's a lot of times in Jill's book where you can still see a lot of his lasting imprint of the brainwashing, and she still has not yet unpacked some of these things, like if a parent is reported to the police because there's things happening like what happened to Jill, that's not someone being jealous. And I can assure you the person that did contact the police was not jealous. In this interview with Entertainment Tonight, they talk a little bit about that, and Derick actually speaks directly about the fact that there were bad actors, but he also held Jim Bob and Michelle accountable.
I do hold, to some extent, I think, I don't know, we might feel differently about this, Jill, and I do feel that it was partly her parents' fault, knowing what was going on and continuing on with the show the way that they did.
You learn in the book that they were in the middle of filming the second season, I believe, of the show, maybe the first, I'm not sure, but they were reported to authorities when the show was being filmed. And so this idea of Jim Bob saying that it was all in the past and like it was somehow they had gone through it as a family and they had dealt with it is completely and utterly false. Yes, things that Josh had done a few years before were over, maybe, that we know of, but the police investigation was happening in the middle of all of this, and at no point did they stop and consider the impact this would have on the kids. They also had to have people coming to their house all the time. That was another thing that Jill talked about in the book. People would just come in unannounced to make sure that there were proper doors that were locked, that people were sleeping in the right rooms, that things were being done up correctly, that there was safeguards in place for the kids. And at no time were any of the kids removed from the home, nor was Josh. So, you know, you hear Derick for the very first time say, I hold the parents responsible for this. Jill would not. She would not hold them responsible. She still doesn't hold them responsible for going public with the show at all. So maybe in time she will get there. And it's obviously heartbreaking that this happened. But you know, she does talk a little bit about some of the decisions that her parents made and further expanded on that in the interview.
I think another factor is sons and daughters are treated very differently in this culture. And with Jill being a daughter, it's very different than whenever some of her brothers got to the point that we were at years before.
I really hope that things get better and not worse. Like, I don't have any.
In the book, you learn that Josh Duggar was paid by his dad once he got married to Anna. And Josh was making money from the show on top of Jim and Michelle, and he did pay them. And Jim Bob admitted to Derick and Jill that he had paid Josh and Anna and that he had made a decision at some point that he was no longer going to pay them anymore. But you also learn that once Josh goes to rehab after he's caught cheating on his wife, again, Jim Bob bails out Josh and gives him a car lot, literally a car lot to work at, buys him a car lot basically, puts him in a house, spends all this money on Josh, but she's fighting tooth and nail to literally just get paid. So he admitted to paying Josh, he admitted to paying Anna and Josh, but Jill and Derick were not treated the same. And Derick says the boys in the family are treated differently. They're not as respected as the girls. They don't get the same pushback. Jill is invaluable. It doesn't have any value to her dad because all she is a vehicle for babies. And that's it. She's not valuable to her dad. Her dad has no respect for women. You know, there's a lot of boundaries still in place. She said that her parents they respect the boundaries more now, but that she doesn't have any one-on-one contact with her dad, and that they're afraid to cross boundaries now because she said that they're serious, that they will leave and they will put things in place if need be, and they don't respect boundaries. I'm assuming like a protective order. So her dad has been sort of like put in a place where he's complying with her boundaries, but not because he wants to, but out of fear.
Well, for example, after Ginger's book came out and then after we announced our book, there was a text from my dad. He was just saying, like, to all the kids on the group, like, don't speak negatively about us, like, speaking of my parents, don't speak negatively about us or else you'll be cut out of the inheritance.
So it sounds like Jim Bob threatened the family over both books, Ginger and Jill's, that if they said anything negative about him, that they would be cut off from their inheritance. And you haven't seen a lot of negativity from any of the siblings about any of the books. You've seen an influx in them posting positivity. I mean, heck, John David showed up out of nowhere. He's literally been offline for a million years. So Jim Bob clearly didn't want either book to be published, but it's funny because now he's telling people to read Ginger's book if you want the better truth about the IBLP, because they're learning from their mistakes. Whatever. And you understand that he's really controlling the dynamics in this family because he's forcing the kids to pick a side and decide who they're going to side with and who they're going to do. And the kids want access to the inheritance, but they also want access to the money that he has now, which helps them have businesses and helps the boys have businesses. And there's also that fear of disobeying your parents and honoring your family in this cult, where he feels like he has the ability to bully people into doing what he wants. But a father that would make his kids feel like they can't even speak about their situation, it's a horrible dynamic. And she kind of touches on whether or not she harbors any resentment with her mother further in this interview.
Growing up in the group that I did and just my own story, I can see how there are, like, some of the ways that my mom might have behaved in certain situations makes sense to me, why things were handled that way.
Because that was her teaching.
Yeah, and just like, you're in this predicament, you know? Try and keep my mom out of the middle of it. Now, at first I think.
So what I'm getting from Jill in her, without her saying anything directly, is that in this culture, women are to obey and submit to their husband's authority, and their husbands are basically like their vehicle to God. So the God is over the husband, and then the husband is over the wife. And so for the woman to get to God, she has to go through her husband. And so a husband almost becomes like a God to the wife. And she has to obey whatever the husband says and believes that everything the husband is doing is instructed by God. And so it sounds like she's sort of understanding the position that her mom has found herself in. And the predicament is what she's talking about, and that those decisions are based upon the fact that she's submitting and obeying her authority and believes that she has to because it's part of her teachings. I don't know if Michelle has ever pushed back and wanted to push back and wanted to do more for her kids. I know that I've talked to people that know the family and have said that Michelle, you know, and if you read Jill's book, you really do see that she's a very willing participant, or seemingly a willing participant, in enforcing whatever Jim Bob wants. And that could be because she doesn't want to have to deal with her own repercussions of disobeying him. And who knows what those repercussions might be. I mean, we just really don't know in their relationship how he's treating her, whether there's, I mean, obviously in this culture, a woman cannot say no to a man in the bedroom, but in some families, domestic discipline is an option too. And I spoke to someone a couple weeks ago that said that that was something that was discussed in circles of the Duggars in the early 2000s. So you just don't know what she might face if she does say no to her dad or to her husband. So, you know, Jill and Derick sort of described what would happen and how Jim Bob sort of exerts the control in the family. And he will even show up if he knows Jill's going to be there, just so she knows that he knows where she is, just to show her, maybe intimidate her, but he won't bring up anything with her in public. She said, it's not like it used to be. It used to be like we would get pulled to the side into a room and told off, you know, behind closed doors. But now there's this respect of our boundary where it's like it would not fly. Like we would pick up and leave if that came up. Derick said, I think what's sad is that the pattern that we've seen is kind of happening to us, where if you're somebody that he can't control, then you're cut off. It's like, I can't control you, so you're cut off. You can hang out sometimes and have surface level conversations, which is what I'm actually wanting right now. She doesn't want to go deeper. So basically, he controls by controlling information and controlling what can be said. Obviously, we've heard what he threatened the family, and he also controls access. So because he can't control her anymore and he's deemed her dangerous, he's basically said that she doesn't exist to him and has controlled other people's access to her. It's a sad situation all around, and there's some really raw and emotional aspects of Jill's book that I think she has come so far, and then there's other areas in the book like when she talks about what happened with Josh. And she didn't have to get into the nitty-gritty details. I would never want her to done that. But it's very clear that some of the things that her dad has told her or the stories he's talked to her about are still things that are playing in her mind as true. And I think the further she gets away from it, maybe more clarity will come, more counseling, more years of processing. It can take a lifetime to unravel what she's gone through. So her continued, healing is a part of this process, and her continuing to unravel all of the false teachings and her dad's role in those teachings. And sadly, the family is massively fractured as a result of it. But I really came here to say that I'm glad to see that Derick would be willing to go on record and say that it was Josh, Jim Bob, and Michelle's responsibility to protect the girls, and they are at fault for making them public. None of this would have mattered. None of it would have mattered if they were never a public family, ever. Nobody would have ever gone digging into those bones. And it's unfortunate that the information came out that way, but that's also in conjunction to Josh's current situation, that what he did to his sisters played a role in his sentencing. So in some way, that information did end up coming out anyway. It just, again, the burden falls on Josh for doing it to his sisters and the parents for not protecting the daughters. And while the workers in this case were negligent, I don't think it's their fault, and I would never call them bad actors. And the judge was very clear that they were not bad actors. And I just, I don't believe that the law enforcement were the bad people here. I don't believe the people that were telling the truth and reported them to DHS were jealous. And I don't think anyone that speaks the truth here is wrong. But in Jim Bob's eyes, all the truth tellers are the ones that are worse than the people that are doing the abuse. Hopefully Jill can understand more of that as she unravels more. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.